Hello, it's Denise from Women Beyond a Certain Age. Many of you know my friend, Trina Kay. Trina has been a publicist for I don't know how many, for the 30 years that I've known her in Los Angeles. And sometimes her clients, she sends me her clients. And I'm so grateful because if they're Trina approved, chances are I'm going to like the book, the guest, whatever genre we're in here. And our guest today is Sharon Wishnow, and she's an author. There's so much to say about Sharon, so I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself. But the book today we're discussing is called The Pelican Tide, and it's a novel. And Sharon, it's your first debut novel, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And thank you so much for having me. And thank you to Trina for connecting us.
I'm just thrilled. And Sharon, welcome and thank you. I had said to Sharon before we started that her website for her novel, and I think it isn't it just SharonWishnow.com?
Yep, SharonWishnow.com.
So when people, Cindie always posts all these things, but if anyone's curious, go right to it and read about it because it's really fascinating. To me, it was just so well put together. So Sharon, welcome and thank you. I know how valuable your time is. When does this novel drop?
Oh gosh, it feels like any minute, like that last month of a pregnancy. It feels like that. It drops on June 11th.
Fantastic. Well, you're almost there.
I'm almost
Now, here's what the women, we get some men. We're always surprised, Sharon, when we get men, but we get mostly what men contact me. I think, what the hell? But we get mostly women and women from 40 up. Okay. We're mostly women. And when we see our analytics, or I don't even know if that's the correct word. I was just trying to sound smart. When we see the statistics of people that listen to the podcast, when they're younger women, and I know some of them from different things, I think they're looking for wisdom. Okay. I think they're looking for wisdom for the future. So when I have not finished all your novel yet. I read about half of it yesterday, Sharon, because I couldn't put it down. It's a
Oh,
page
good.
turner. Couldn't put it down. So I don't want to spoil so people can spoil any surprises so people will buy and read the novel. But what I think that would be fascinating to know is you tell us about your background in writing, but how did you possibly get the idea all of a sudden to write a novel?
That's a really good question.
Because it's
So
not an easy feat.
it is not an easy feat, and the little secret is that my debut novel is actually the fourth novel that I wrote.
Okay, perfect.
So it doesn't the first novel will never ever leave the hard drive. She shouldn't. She was horrible. But
Okay.
that's okay. I have always been a writer. I paid my mortgage writing nonfiction. I started in the food industry when I was living in Europe, and sort of came back to the United States and went and got some more credentials. I became a professional editor. I got a master's degree, an MFA in creative nonfiction because I was bored and I wanted more education. And I always said, gee, someday I'm going to write a novel, but I never felt that I had anything to say. I never felt, and I was always intimidated in fiction workshops and classes in college because these people had just so much going on that I didn't. But I was a good nonfiction writer. I like the truth. I like meeting people and telling their stories. And so as the kind of years ticked on, the conversation I had with myself was sort of like when I got pregnant. It's like, gee, if you're going to do this, you better get on it. And so I started thinking, I think I've lived enough of my life. I've been enough places that maybe I have a novel in me. And I had an idea for a first book. Again, everybody's first book usually ends up in the drawer, which it did. And then I had an idea for a second book. That was sort of the book of my heart. And with that book, which is not this one, I sent it off, did the whole querying process. I was fortunate enough to land an agent right away. and she died on submission. We sent her out and she didn't go anywhere. And I went, was very upset. And I said, okay. So I wrote another novel. And my agent wasn't wild about that one. So she went in the drawer. And so I was feeling a little like, okay, now what? And so we were right at the beginning of the pandemic, and people were starting to stay in a little bit more. And we hadn't shut down yet, but people were staying in more and looking for things to keep themselves busy. And I do a lot of science writing for my work, and I always write a lot about the ocean. I'm from Massachusetts originally. I grew up on the beach. And so I'm always fascinated about what's happening, back at home and what's happening there. And the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which is in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, up in the Cape, had done a 1 hour free, lecture on the Deepwater Horizon 10 years after. And I went, it's been 10 years since that well blew up. And because I remember logging on and seeing the well, and I was just sort of hanging out, couldn't go anywhere, bored. And this was, right before everything shut down for the pandemic. And I tuned in to find out what happened and what was happening to the environment 10 years later. And it was so fascinating because it was a historic event that I remembered. And then I started to say to myself, well, this is, great. The environment's coming back, the birds, the plants, the ocean is recovering from the oil spill. What happened to the people?
Fabulous.
And I get so off to the races I went.
Now, I have to tell you a couple of things you said, which I think is so valuable to anyone. Sharon, I've taken several writing courses. The books that Cindie and I wrote in our career were all, food books. They were cookbooks and how-to books, how to start a catering business, how to do your own wedding, that kind of thing. Now, those books were so simple. Do you know what I mean? You start with an outline and you write them, and I had an agent and they all got published and I loved it. But I wanted to write my memoir forever. I mean, I'm waiting to die. I'm waiting after I've died, that on my tombstone, it will say she never finished. Okay. That's what it's just going to say. She never finished it. But I have actually gone to a memoir class recently in Tuscany last October by a wonderful woman that has an online class. And the reason why I bore you with that is this. When I got there, I realized that what I'd written before wasn't any good. Okay. I'm not just being judgmental myself. I realized it wasn't very good. So I put it in the drawer, as you would say. Then I went into old writings, and some of it I was able to salvage so little. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, okay, so that was book number 2. That book's never going to get published. And I was kind of shocked to find out that I could have done that much writing and look back at now and realize it's not usable. But by you just saying that you had 2 or 3 other novels that didn't go anywhere gives me incredible hope.
Oh, yes. And all the writing that you do to where you are now, it counts.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to, for our audience. I have many of the people that contact Cindie and I are women that are retired now or almost retired, or they're changing careers at 60. Most of them have been in food. Mm-hmm. Sharon, most of them are chefs. So with that said, several of them started writing because they have to get off their feet. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's all it comes down to.
Yeah.
They can't work in kitchens anymore. And I keep saying to them, write a cookbook, or at least sketch one out. But, and there's many agents that represent cookbook authors and stuff. But it's easier said than done. That's all. Even people that have done some writing, to sit down and write a novel that is gripping or interesting like yours is quite a feat. I'm telling you, I know it. And also because I buy a lot of books and I read a lot, I can't tell you how many books I go to the library or I buy them from Amazon. Of course, I should say I go to a small bookstore, but I'm lazy and sometimes I just buy them from Amazon. And I'm halfway. I read 2 chapters and I donate it to the lending library. Do you know what I mean? Because the book isn't engaging.
Well, also, I think not every book is for every reader.
Yes,
And I try to give every book that I read 100 pages of my time. But I have there's too much to read, and do
yes.
not finish is an acceptable outcome.
Okay. Now I have to tell you, one of the things that I love that you wrote is it said, I'm quoting you off your right
Okay.
off your website.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to my corner of the internet. I'm so happy you've landed here. I think that's absolutely charming. I write upmarket fiction, book club books about flawed, strong women with plots that have environmental themes.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's, we used to say when you used to actually meet an agent before everything was just done over the internet, my agent would say to me, you have to have a one-liner like an elevator speech and
Yep.
tell people exactly what your book idea is and go with it. And when I read yours, I thought, oh my God, she did it in one sentence.
It was a hard sentence.
It's a great sentence, though.
Yeah.
Amazing. So so you wrote it and now it's actually, and you found a publisher? You found a
Yes,
publisher
I published through Lake Union, which
okay,
is an imprint that actually it's an Amazon imprint, but this isn't this is not a self-published like a book like a
got it.
KDP. It's an actual imprint. I actually got in advance, and I needed an agent
Wonderful.
and all that. Yeah,
That's huge. It's wonderful.
it is.
What did you learn by this book selling that you hadn't learned with other writings that you'd done?
Oh my gosh, that I knew absolutely nothing. Like
Okay.
I was so green. I had no idea how green I was. Um, I was embarrassed. I don't know how to use a comma. Yeah, the whole and I edit, but I'm a nonfiction editor. The whole publishing fiction world, I felt like I still feel this way. Like I've walked into a really dark room, and every now and then someone turns on a little corner light, and I'm waiting for the whole picture to come in. Um, I think the biggest thing everybody has to learn about publishing is it takes a lot longer than you think it does.
Well said. And writing and publishing take a lot longer than people think it's going to.
Oh, for sure. And it's not something you have to sit your butt in the chair and you actually have to produce the
Yes.
work. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, you're not writing alone. You're working with editors, you're working with people with opinions, and you can choose to take those opinions or you can choose not to take those opinions.
Yes, exactly. And I read your acknowledgments. It sounds like you had a really good experience working with this publisher.
Lake Union has blown me away. I've known several Lake Union authors and everyone's really happy, but the level of detail and care that they have put into this book is amazing. My book takes place in Grand Isle, Louisiana. It's Cajun country. And the
Yes.
proofreader was Cajun.
Oh, how perfect.
And I was like, and I said to one of my book friends, they gave me a Cajun proofreader, and her response was, of course they did.
Oh, how perfect.
Yeah.
Now answer me this. I love the cover.
Thank you.
Cover's beautiful. Tells the story. And tell me this, what did you have to do? Please tell, I know that you have been very involved with research for writers and other curious people.
Mhm.
So you positioned yourself in your writing career, to me, Sharon, to really uh, to get the most out of it. Do you see what I don't mean? I mean for you to learn as you are also working.
Yep.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I always joke that the only reason I write anything is so I get to research it.
Well, there you go. So did you I can tell by reading the book, but you had to research then the rig disaster, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot.
That was and wasn't really too sure where to start. Like there was a big blockbuster Hollywood movie and the interesting thing about this particular point in history is you can see it all online. I mean, there's all of these videos. You can actually see it on fire. You can see the oil coming into the shore. You can see the dead birds. You can see everything. There's newspaper accounts. Um, I was literally at one point, I have one scene where the character is counting the boats in the water, and I actually was like watching videos and literally counting the boats that I could see in the water. Um, it's a little analysis paralysis because there's so much out there.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
were
yeah.
so many different ways I could tell a story. And so, of course, I told it through food because everybody eats.
Yes. And it's interesting. Do you know
Thank
what I
you.
mean? Food is interesting. How kitchens work are interesting. I mean, kitchens are little societies all of their own. Do you know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
it,
And it's
it's
community,
it's a community.
yeah.
Yes,
And so
exactly.
it was sort of the natural thing to the economy of Grand Isle where this takes place, and it's a real place, is tourism
Yeah,
and small restaurants and shrimping and food. That's what they got there, and that's
yeah,
kind of what unites them. So it just made perfect sense that the hub of this story was going to be in a restaurant.
got it. Where do you get inspiration for characters?
Oh gosh. That sometimes people I know. One of my guilty pleasures in the morning is the BuzzFeed list that you get on your little phone, and they're like, the most shocking thing I've ever heard my mother-in-law say. I love those. Oh my gosh, I eat them up, and I come up with the craziest characters based on these true stories. So all of my people come from real people. I'm a big eavesdropper. It's kind of a bad habit. And I overhear conversations and I write things down all the time to the embarrassment of my family. And
Oh no, I love it.
so my characters just tend to come from um, people passing through my life. And it's I never write about anyone specific, but somebody will say something or have an interesting story, I'm sorry, you're in my book now.
I love that. Well, I think Annie Lamott said it when she said, if people didn't want me to write about them, they should have been nicer to me. That's a
Absolutely.
paraphrase. And so I think now I personally, I say that to sometimes to people, to Sharon. I'll say to them, that's too good of a story. I'm not going to use that somewhere. I may not have a spot for it now, but that's a nugget. And one of my favorites, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but the audience will enjoy it. One of my oldest friends in the world having a torrid love affair. I kept saying to her, you got to close this deal. Do you know what I mean? Why aren't you engaged? Why aren't you something?
Exactly.
No, that wasn't happening. Well, she went over to his apartment one night. She had a key. She opened the door of the apartment and she sees in the living room a pair of very expensive high heels
That are
and
not
clothes are
hers.
not hers and clothes strewn about, and the bedroom door is closed. So she realizes that he's not alone. And she took one of the shoes. She didn't make a scene. She
Yeah,
didn't make a scene.
that's like the perfect scene. I couldn't write that. I couldn't write that.
Exactly. And she took one of the shoes and she left. She called me the next morning to tell me the whole story. And I
Oh my
remember
gosh.
thinking to myself, and then of course they had a scene later on. But I thought that was one of the smartest and most cleverest things I'd ever heard someone do. And you write about, and it says this in your publicity packet, but it says that you write about strong women in difficult situations or with problems. And isn't that what we all are?
Yeah. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think I'm writing characters that I want my daughters to grow up to be.
Lovely, lovely to say that. That's a great way to put it. Do you have a second book off this Pelican Tide that you've thought of? Can you see
Um,
being a second one?
I'm not a big sequel person. Usually
Okay.
when I'm kind of done, but I have thought that if I was going to write a story, Josie's best friend is the mayor. She's a
Yes,
woman, and I think Louise actually has a story.
got it.
Um, and the way the book ends, I sort of leave a door open that perhaps Louise would pick up the mantle and her story would continue.
At the end of the very end of the book, you you gave readers a couple of recipes.
Yes, yes, that was so fun.
I loved it. What made you choose those recipes? Tell us. One is a brownie, a chili brownie.
Mhm.
One is the pepper sauce, isn't it? That's almost the hot sauce that's
Yeah.
almost a character in your book,
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Sharon. And then what was the third one? Oh, a little shortbread cookie or a
It's
little
like
cookie?
it's a Southern tea cake and it's
Oh,
like a
Southern
shortbread
tea
cookie.
cake.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That was super fun. I love those little surprises at the back of a book. I just wanted to do that. And I was like, this is a book about a chef, and because she's stressed, she's a stress baker. And
Yes.
who hasn't stress baked?
Yes,
I
exactly.
was like, and everybody, and so I started, and one of the challenges in the real story, in the real life of Grand Isle, was they lost all their seafood. And so all of these things that my chef was known for,
Yes.
she couldn't get the ingredients anymore. There was a fishing ban. So she turns to baking. And so I started researching. I don't come from the South originally. And so I was like, what would be an iconic Southern homey thing that somebody would have grown up with? And I kept seeing these recipes for tea cakes. And so I took a tea cake recipe and modified it. I'm not a recipe developer, but we did that. And we just had a grand time here in the house making hundreds of, batches of tea cakes
Oh, yeah.
and flavoring them in the story. And then I was like, wow, my daughter makes this particular brownie recipe. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd love to take this brownie recipe and put chili peppers in it, like a mole. And it fits within the theme of the chili peppers in the book. So
Yes.
that came around. The hot sauce is a really interesting thing. So Josie, my main character, is named after a real woman whose name was Josephina, who was a chef. She lived in the UK. She was from Spain, actually. And her son is a very, very dear friend of mine. And he actually had a hot sauce company in the UK and had won a couple of competitions. And I had sort of consulted with my friend many times about the chilies and the hot sauces. And it was his mother, who I named the book, the character after. And when it came time to put a hot sauce recipe in, I asked him if I could have one of the family recipes. And so the Revenge of the Cajun Reaper at the end is an actual, family recipe that he made and sold for a while in the UK.
How
I
fabulous.
won't dare make it because it's just way too hot, but I have had it.
I love it. I think that's wonderful. And I thought it was very fun to find the recipes at the end of the book.
Absolutely. It's like a
Very
little,
fun.
it's just a little bonus.
And also what I loved, totally, like I said, it's set up, you set readers up for success or for people. You have I have never, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not a member of a book club.
Mhm.
Okay, Sharon, and since I've moved, when I was in LA, I went to one or two, but since I retired and moved up here, I have not joined a book club. Reading your book made me think I should start a book club
Well, I would
in my
love that. Now you
neighborhood.
have your first read.
I thought I should start a book club. And you have in the back, which I guess is a smart thing to do and people do nowadays, you have book club questions
Yeah.
so that people are guided.
Yeah. And there's a whole book club tab on my website, and there's a letter to book clubs. I really want this to be something that people talk about.
Yes,
And that's part of my sort of soft environmental message is talk about this stuff. Like, don't
yes.
pretend it didn't happen. Don't pretend it's not happening. Talk about it.
It's very important. It's very important. And you just said, I worked in New Orleans for a while. So
Ah,
I worked on one of the I was an intern on one of the river boats that goes up the
the Mississippi. Yeah.
Mississippi. Now, and I loved it, Sharon, and I loved I loved New Orleans and but the humidity when you work in a kitchen, I would was more than this California. I've been raised here my whole life. Do you know what I mean? So I wanted to work in New Orleans more because I love gumbo and I was lucky enough to make friends with several chefs and I've worked with a lot of chefs from New Orleans, but I could never get past the humidity.
Nope.
And my hair is straight, but in New Orleans, it's not straight.
It's not
And
straight.
I would take a shower in the morning and you're having your coffee
Yep.
and you're getting ready to get to the boat. I called it the barge, which they didn't appreciate, but you get to the boat and as you're in your car, you're already sweaty. And I think to myself, oh my God, I was so tired this morning. I forgot to take a shower. And
Yeah.
then I think, oh no, I had a shower. I'm just already
Yes.
stinky from humidity.
Yeah. Glowing. You glow.
But I can't, the environmental impact, and I think it's wonderful that you've decided that you built it around this, because it reminds people how important it is. Do you know what I mean? That's all. Reminds
Well,
people.
also it was the, oh my gosh, what would it have been like to live in a place where it's 110 in the shade on the summer and there's oil everywhere? Like
Yeah.
what would that be like?
Yes.
And so that was a big portion of like of the story world, and putting myself as much as I could into the mind of people living through it, and
Yes.
just how stifling it was. And it's not in your face so much in the book, but we do talk about the fact that you could smell the oil all the way to New Orleans.
I live in Ventura now, which is only 30 minutes from Santa Barbara. So and been in LA for 35 years. I've been to the Santa Barbara beach after an oil disaster. Do you know what I mean? And you
Oh yeah.
describe it perfectly, Sharon, about little clumps of oil all over the beach,
Yeah.
and it's on your shoes, and you just realize that it's going to take forever for this to, you know, forever to clean it up. So I think you handle it really well, and I think it's it's interesting. It's thought provoking, but it's not in people's face. Do you know what I mean? Exactly what you just said. It's perfect. I thought you did a
I
really good
appreciate
job
that.
on it.
I didn't want to literally plant my flag in the sand. I
Exactly.
wanted, because the oil in the and I write about this in the book, is that the oil industry is how people make their living, and you can't tell people they can't make a living regardless of how you feel about it. And I
Exactly.
didn't want that. I wanted this to be something that people would talk about.
I loved it. When I first got out of school, um, Sharon, an oil companies came to school and canvassed people to work on an oil rig.
Oh my gosh, that's
Okay.
crazy.
So as a chef,
Yeah, yeah.
so they came to the school to look for people. And I looked into it, wonderful money, but really wonderful money if it was out, because you're out of the country and you don't pay taxes for 18 months and there's different things. They, when I said to my mother, well, maybe I'll get this job on the oil rig, she said to me, no, no. Denise, I've never said no to a lot of things the last 10 years, but no, you cannot work on an oil rig.
See, but I
So,
love that. But
but
an earlier version of the book took place on the rig, and one of the characters who morphed was a chef on the oil rig. And I had several, Chef Carlos, I had several chapters of him cooking on the rig, and he was a friend to Josie on the island. And so yes, what you're saying is like what I had built that whole world, and it was a great gig for them, and the money is enticing, and but you are on an oil platform in the middle of nowhere.
details. Then after that, Sharon, and then I want to ask you one more question. Then I got a job. I can't remember. No, I got a headhunter called me. I'd been a chef now for a couple of years in LA. And I got a call from a headhunter, and they wanted me to go be on a Russian missile base.
Oh my gosh.
I know, but I guess it was an American missile base, but it was very close to Russia. Anyway, the Russians were involved. Everyone had to approve. And they really liked me. And I really liked that job. Again, it was so much money, and you only had to go for like, you worked 9 weeks and you were off 9 weeks, and
Ah,
you made an enormous amount of money in taxes. And that job I was in to like the third interview, but then I met my husband that I have now. And I met him and I thought, okay, I guess I'm not going on the missile base. But they call jobs like that in the chef world isolation cooking.
oh really? Oh, that's a great term.
Yeah, because and of course, the only thing I knew, which I didn't know how exactly I was going to fix, at the Russian, in the missile base, you had to make everything from scratch. I mean, supplies came from Germany through but there wasn't all that much product to have. This was in
Right.
the early 90s. So you had to bake bread. You had to make everything from scratch. And I remember thinking my bread skills aren't that good. And I didn't want to get all the way there and have like 30 angry men say, Jesus, this girl can't make a loaf of bread that we can eat. So
Yeah.
anyway, that job was not mine to be
But
either.
what a fantastic character that would be to develop. And
It's
then, of course, she
yours.
would be a spy.
That's
And
right. It's yours.
thank
It's
you.
yours. Take it. I'm
Just
never going to
mad.
write that. Sharon, do you think, and what would be your advice? Now you've been a writer all your life. You're polished. You know, being a scientific writer, am I saying that correctly? Or a technical writer, you know how to get words in a sentence to flow. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know if people realize, I think by reading a lot, I've become a better writer.
Yes.
But for people that are listening to us, if someone says, okay, I listened to this great podcast and I want to write a book or at least write a story about
Mhm.
something in my life, how do they get started?
Well, the first they have to decide if they're writing fiction or nonfiction, but for the
Okay.
sake of this is fiction. So there's the sort of the joke in the writing industry is either you're a plotter or a pantser. A plotter is a person who sits and makes this like wonderfully detailed outline and then writes from the outline. Very efficient, great way to get your books out. And then there's pantsers, people like me who basically write by the seat of their pants. And so you kind of have to experiment with whether you are, or something in between, whether you're going to just sit down and write, or if you are going to really, put together that outline. It's always best to read in the genre that you're writing in. If you're
Got it.
writing romance, read romances. Like, what do you like about them? What don't you like
Yeah.
about them? If you like
Yeah.
science fiction, if you like little meatier things like what I write, what we call book club fiction, if you like mysteries, there's a subgenre called cozy mystery, which is when the local lady who works in the flower shop solves the crime kind of thing. So it's not like
You.
or which is different than the detective police officer. So start by reading what it is you think you want to write and really pick out the authors that you like and see how they do it. And then the only way it happens is you sit down and you start and you just start putting those words down. The other thing I always, always tell people is don't write alone. It is very lonely to sit in
Yes.
your office or your bedroom or wherever you're writing the bus in the morning and write without anyone to talk to. There are hundreds of local writing organizations. I'm heavily involved with the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and through
Good.
them, I have found some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with, and they're people who know me as me, the writer, not me as a former life. So so writers will meet you where you are, and you can talk to people, and you can plot with people, and you can cry with people, and you can celebrate with people, and that is what makes the writing meaningful. Don't write alone.
Excellent tips. Excellent tips. And I know from moving here, um, I found a local through the Ventura Writers Association. I found a writers group that I went to for a little bit that really helped me to make me realize that I was going to take an online course. And the reason why is you just made such a point about knowing what you're writing, what kind of writing that you're looking at,
Mhm.
where does the book fit in the marketplace? Because I went to this 2 nights, 2 or 3 weeks, but a couple of nights to a writers group. And Sharon, they wrote science fiction.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm sitting at the table with these people and they have made up words and it was like reading Star Trek.
They weren't your people, were they?
Oh, and I have to tell you, and I was so entranced by them because they were all so sincere. But the woman who was running the group, afterwards, I said, I don't know how to tell you this. I can't come back. I don't even understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, yeah, this isn't for you. But it was a very good learning lesson.
Yes. You
Since then, I have
play with
gotten
it, find your people.
find your people.
I'm not a romance writer. I don't read a lot of them. And so when I am in a room with romance writers, they talk about things that I'm like, yeah, I get nothing.
I know, I don't get it either. And you know what? There's never, I don't care how well you write it, there's just never enough about the manhood.
Yeah, you're like, okay.
It's not real. Now, Sharon, all I can tell you is you're a delight.
Oh, thank
Your
you.
book called The Pelican Tide. And where will it be for sale? Hopefully everywhere. Yes?
So because I am published through Lake Union, I am exclusively available on the Amazon platform,
Perfect.
through Kindle, through Audible, and through hard copy. It is on sale right now for pre-order. It's free on Kindle Unlimited and Audible. I have the most amazing people who are going to be doing the audio narration. So I am probably more excited about the audiobook than the print book. So if that is something that, people like, and I love just to have a book on in the background when I'm doing other things, it makes chores go by.
I was slow to the party about audio, but I get it now. You know, Cindie and I worked together for 25 years. Cindie handled everything technically and did our marketing. So when I retired, I was like a baby on the freeway, Sharon. That's what I was, a baby crawling on the freeway. So it's taken me a while to learn technical things. I don't think the ghost of Steve Jobs is at all frightened by my technical skills, but I think audiobooks, that's good to know. So you're on the Amazon, your book's for sale at Amazon. It's what you're
Yes,
saying. An
yes.
exclusive platform. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it is book club fiction. And so if you have listeners who want to have me on,
Yes.
Zoom in virtually for a book club, I love doing that. I love talking to groups of people about the books and other authors and things going on in the literary world. So I'm always
All right.
happy to join a book club.
All right, Sharon. So if I start a book club, I'm going to have you be a guest.
I would love that. That would be absolutely fabulous. And I always send wine. So
Oh, well, I have wine isn't, I got wine sitting those, but I could make those brownies. Okay.
yes, yes, you could kill those brownies. That
And
would be
this sounds like a
amazing.
date to me. This
It
sounds like
does. Yeah.
a goal.
The chocolate chili chip brownies with a glass of the right red as a pair is like a Zinfandel is their dinner.
It sounds delicious. I love it. Thank you so much. Now, for everyone listening, of course, those our followers know Cindie puts all Sharon's information up when we broadcast. It'll be on Facebook. It's on our website. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at womenbeyond@icloud.com. You can also, you'll be able to reach out to Sharon directly.
Yes.
So, Sharon, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to email Trina when we get off and thank her for sending you to me because I really enjoyed it. And the idea is I'm going to be able to read the rest of your novel this afternoon.
Well, then you'll have to call me and let me know how you like it at the end.
I'm very, I just think it's having written, wanting to write more, it's people do not realize how hard it is, even when you love it, even when you're good at it. So I'm totally impressed with your novel.
Well, thank you. I thank you. I hope when you get to the end, it feels like I ended it in the right spot.
Okay.
And you'll
I will
have to
tell
let
you
me
what I
know.
think when I finish.
And you'll have to let me know if you think Luis deserves a sequel.
Okay, good. I'm happy to do that. I thank you again, Sharon. I thank Cindie who keeps the train on the track. And let me tell you something, it's not always been easy, but she's a strong girl. And everyone, we thank you for listening. We love messages from people. Thank you. We love people that share the podcast. And if there's anything we can do for you, contact us. So thank you, Sharon, again. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Miss Cindie. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone that
Cindie. Thank you,
listened.
Denise. Appreciate it. It's been fun.